It's a normal, busy day in downtown Taipei. Then an air raid siren goes off, and the city comes to a halt. A train station is evacuated as firefighters rush to put out a blaze. Drills like this one, simulating a missile strike, happen every year across Taiwan, coinciding with military exercises on the coast in preparation for a possible attack. Daily life in Taiwan doesn't revolve around the fear of war with China, which claims the island as a breakaway province it must eventually control. But it's an ever-present threat to the self-governed democracy of 23 million people, and a defining issue as voters prepare to elect a new leader. Their options: 3 men, each pledging to keep the peace with their giant neighbor across the Taiwan Strait.
We don't want to be enemies. We can be friends. And we love to see China can enjoy democracy and freedom just like us.
The Taiwan Strait must be stable, and Taiwan must be safe. This is my top priority.
A real important principle is we have to think of a way to have dialogue with China, and not just always tell them no, because after no, there is no other step.
Hello and welcome to Taiwan Decides, a special report. I'm Yvonne Mann in Taipei. Taiwan's presidential election in January is drawing global attention, with the island emerging as a key flashpoint between China and the U.S. The ruling party's candidate, Vice President Ching-te, once called himself a pragmatic worker for Taiwanese independence, angering Beijing and raising concerns in Washington. He has since softened his rhetoric while maintaining that Taiwan is already an independent country. Lai spoke with Bloomberg Businessweek's Joel Weber about his plans.
For Taiwanese presidential hopeful Lai Ching-te, events like these have become the new norm. Meeting with DPP faithful between his duties as the party's chairman and serving as Taiwan's vice president.
Welcome to my hometown.
Thank you very much for hosting us. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, let me introduce my house. Yeah.
But it's in his hometown of Wanli, 25 miles north of Taipei, where we first meet up.
Yeah, this is my father's painting, and this is my mother's painting.
I know that you had a very close relationship with her.
Yeah, my mother worked very hard all her life. She has been my inspiration.
Lai grew up in this modest family home where he opens up to me about his family, political future, and the future he sees for Taiwan.
I always say, peace is our destination. Democracy is our compass. We have no choice to navigate bravely through this complicated situation.
Do you feel that the international community treats Taiwan justly?
I think so. I think so. Because Taiwan security is a global issue, and the peace in the Indo-Pacific region benefit all the country.
I know this may seem obvious to you, but why do you want to be president of Taiwan?
因为我想领导这个国家。
I want to lead this country so that our citizens can have better lives. And I want to lead this country particularly in a time of growing geopolitical complexities, to be a stable force here in the Indo-Pacific region.
The DPP has refused to accept the principle that Taiwan is part of one China, prompting Beijing to cut off formal contact with Taipei. Now Lai is presenting himself as a continuity candidate. He's angered Beijing for his views on cross-strait ties, and some observers say tensions could worsen if he wins. But Lai is seeking to reassure voters and the international community that he's a safe pair of hands.
We don't want to be enemies. We can be friends. And we love to see China can enjoy democracy and freedom just like us, as long as there is parity and dignity. Our door is always open. we are willing to cooperate with China to advance peace and prosperity. However, until China renounces the force against Taiwan, we must strengthen our military capacity and stand shoulder to shoulder with democracies.
Do the Taiwanese people want formal independence? And do you want formal independence?
我们必须要根据事实，就是说我所谓的务实。
We must abide by the truth, which is what I mean by pragmatism. It is that Taiwan is already a sovereign, independent country called the Republic of China. It's not part of the People's Republic of China. The ROC and PRC are not subordinate to one another. It is not necessary to declare independence.
另外宣布独立。
What is your roadmap to formal independence?
因为我的责任就是维持台海的现状。
My responsibility is to maintain the status quo in the Taiwan Strait while protecting Taiwan and maintaining democracy, peace and prosperity. So no such framework exists. We must work to maintain the peaceful status quo because Taiwan is already a sovereign country.
To become president, though, he must court the all-important youth vote, a key part of his campaign. Being here must remind you of your two sons and your grandson.
Yeah.
How do you explain to them that this younger generation, that someday they may have to stand up and fight?
孩子孙子还小，如果他长大的话，
I will tell my sons, as my grandson is still very young, everyone grows up in different circumstances. I myself had a difficult upbringing in the countryside. But regardless of how we grew up, we must all work together. We must work together to take care of those less fortunate. We grew up on this land. We should fight for this land as much as we are able to and ensure that Taiwan's people can have fulfilling lives here for generations.
Coming up, meet the ruling party's challengers in Taiwan's presidential race. A former police chief who's aiming to reclaim the presidency for the once dominant Kuomintang, and a political outsider whose popularity is challenging the two main parties. Taiwan, under the DPP, has had a tense relationship with China. Beijing has dialed up the pressure, and there's been no formal communication after President Tsai Ing-wen refused to endorse the One China principle. Now the opposition KMT's candidate, Ho Yo-yi, is promising to reestablish talks. Ho spoke about his vision with Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu.
Ho Yo-yi built his career handling high-risk situations and confronting danger. Now Taiwan's former police chief is pitching himself as the best person to manage one of the world's top geopolitical hotspots, as president.
所以，我当总统最重要的是坚持民主自由制度，强化国防经费，加强两岸交流，降低两岸冲突，让台湾远离战争。
Once Taiwan's dominant political party, the opposition Kuomintang is on a quest to reclaim the presidency after losing the last two elections to the DPP. Ho's record as Taiwan's top cop and popularity as mayor of New Taipei City have made him the KMT's pick. Ho is pledging to open lines of communication with Beijing. He says dialogue would make Taiwan safer and boost its economy.
Taiwan's leaders should always remember one sentence: preparation for war is necessary, but avoiding war is a leader's responsibility. When the Democratic Progressive Party was in power, it broke the delicate equilibrium in Taiwan and brought that dynamic balance to the edge of conflict in the imminent outbreak of war. So we have to initiate exchanges with mainland scholars, experts, and people. Let the trust between each other continue to accumulate and increase again.
But Ho lacks experience in international diplomacy and is relatively unknown outside Taiwan. He's also been criticized for failing to articulate a clear stance on the One China policy, a cornerstone of U.S.-China relations. He's been pushed to define the policy, but at this university forum, avoided the question. And that's raised concerns about his ability to handle a complex geopolitical issue.
两岸之间的关系很清楚，大家不要去打模糊。两岸之间的关系，不管是什么样的共识，完全建立在一个中华民国宪法之下。
Still, Ho opposes independence and has affirmed his support for the so-called 1992 consensus, the understanding that there is only one China, although the governments in Taipei and Beijing differ on its interpretation. China has made accepting the consensus a precondition for any talks.
So when you talk about dialogue and communication and this responsibility for the leader of Taiwan, I think about former President Wen-je and how he met Xi Jinping in 2015. If you were to become Taiwan's president, would you seek a meeting with Xi?
在现阶段，
The most important thing at this stage is that we in Taiwan still have to stabilize this area in the Taiwan Strait. Therefore, we must first improve our own national defense armaments and our own self-defense capabilities. Of course, in the process of improvement, we will start with dialogue. With the current situations in Taiwan, in fact, we still have a long way to go.
还有一段距离，还要继续的往前走。
One thing the U.S. is obviously very concerned about is Taiwan's military commitments. Wen-je, the former president, cut Taiwan's defense spending when he was serving his term. Would you cut Taiwan's defense spending?
那时候的状况跟现在的状况，
The situation at that time was completely different from the situation now.
现阶段的台湾
At this stage, Taiwan is actually facing constant conflicts,
冲突不断，
and it is easy to spark a conflict accidentally and trigger a war.
擦枪就着火。
Therefore, under the current situation, the defense budget cannot be reduced.
高的预算只会
If you spend the budget, it will only go up, not down.
往下降。
Therefore, we need to continue to discuss with the United States how to improve Taiwan's self-defense capabilities and which weapons and equipment are most suitable for Taiwan in terms of the entire arms purchase.
最适合台湾。
Will you commit to spending 3% of GDP on defense?
其实不管
In fact, no matter how much GDP it is, the most important thing is to make the structure of the national defense budget meet the needs of all our operations. One day, there may even be a chance to gradually increase it to 3% or above.
甚至有一
Of course, that is what should be done.
杀力
Protect life and property at any cost.
保护生命财
With high GDP and high defense budget, this is not the issue. The issue is that you have to use it in the right direction, and it can really make the other party not dare to start a war easily.
而且确实能够让对方不敢轻易起战。
Ho hopes his message will resonate with voters anxious to maintain Taiwan's delicate status quo.
台海要
The Taiwan Strait must be stable, and Taiwan must be safe. This is my top priority.
处理的事项。
Taiwan's presidential elections are usually fought between the two biggest parties, the KMT and the DPP. But a third party, an unconventional candidate, Wen-je, has proven surprisingly popular. Our chief North Asia correspondent Stephen Engel takes a closer look at the man many are calling the election's biggest wildcard.
Former Taipei Mayor Wen-je's hip-hop video illustrates just how his somewhat quirky candidacy is mixing up the race for the Taiwan presidency. At 64 years of age, this former trauma surgeon turned third-party politician is taking on what's been an entrenched political duopoly of the incumbent DPP and the opposition KMT, with a straightforward, if not unconventional approach that polls suggest resonates with younger voters.
We're different from traditional politicians. They're too fake, and young people don't like that.
Bloomberg News spent the better part of 2 days with Ke on the campaign trail, as no other outside candidate had ever given the political establishment such a formidable challenge.
Why do you want to be president of Taiwan?
其实这样的就是说，有时候应该这样讲的
Frankly, we shouldn't be thinking about who will be the best president of Taiwan, rather, who is the most suitable. The DPP will continue to maintain tension with China. The risk of war in Taiwan will remain, and Taiwan's economy will continue to deteriorate because China will definitely do everything possible to block Taiwan. And the KMT is too obedient to China. Therefore, they can't gain the trust of the Taiwanese people, so there needs to be someone in the middle.
Ke's platform towards mainland China is built on two principles: deterrence and dialogue. Yes, he is in favor of a bigger defense budget, but that must be accompanied by better communication with Beijing.
The national defense budget needs to go up because peace comes at a cost. What we don't like about the DPP is that they are opposing China every day, but I can't see them making any preparations. I agree with the move to raise the national defense budget to 3% of GDP, but we disagree on their reckless spending. A real important principle is we have to think of a way to have dialogue with China, and not just always tell them no, because after no, there is no other step.
Ke also disagrees that its major chip makers like TSMC have no other step but to decouple from China and depart for other markets. It's costly and inefficient, he says, to move chip making to America or elsewhere. Defusing tension with China, he says, is the better approach.
If tensions between Taiwan and mainland China continue to rise, we don't need a war. Just the tense situation is enough to result in a decline of foreign investment. A lot of rich people in Taiwan have already started to move their money away. Foreign investment doesn't dare to come in, and the outflow of capital is already causing damage to Taiwan. So that's why we must try to do as much as we can to lower the risk of war.
While Ke sees himself as a straight-talking, apolitical pragmatist, he's also been dogged by questions about his personality, namely some comments he's made towards women, as well as an acknowledged social awkwardness.
For a man who says he doesn't feel too comfortable in social settings, the candidate Ke has to do a lot of handshaking on the campaign trail. Good luck, sir. Do you enjoy meeting with people and talking to them, or do you have... No?
Not too much. I work in ICU, surgeon intensive care unit. All my patients are intubated. They cannot speak.
Right.
Almost all my patients, they are intubated.
Intubated, so you don't need to talk to them?
I don't need to talk with them.
Did it desensitize you?
Almost. But to work in ICU, you cannot be emotional. We believe in order for her to be a civilized country, our people must be rational. Cannot be not too emotional.
For now, the accidental candidate, as Ke likes to call himself, has resonated with centrists within an otherwise polarized electorate. Simply put, he's different and direct. The trick now is to avoid any missteps inside his campaign or across the strait ahead of the election January 13th.
Up next, how Taiwan's upcoming elections could help shape U.S.-China relations and what it means for the world. It was a last-ditch attempt to forge an alliance between Taiwan's opposition parties after previous efforts failed. But the talks never even got started, and the candidates ended up bickering, trading insults on live television.
所以我们还是要当总统候选人要有能力单独去面对困难，而不是需要一堆保姆啊。这个我还是在这这样讲。你今天想的只是如何趁这个机会再扩张政党的利益嘛？ 或者是个人的利益而已。
你可以侮辱我，我可以接受各有不同的侮辱，但是我必须要为人民国家来设想。
必须要先来请各位媒体朋友撤场，谢谢大家今天的参与，不好意思让大家等了这么久的时间。
The KMT's Ho Yo-yi and the TPP's Wen-je ultimately registered rival campaigns for the presidency. Foxconn's billionaire founder Terry Guo, who had been lagging in the polls, dropped out of the race. His campaign had come under pressure, with Taiwan looking into allegations of election graft and Beijing launching investigations into Foxconn's businesses in China. A divided opposition could diminish the prospects of a China-friendly government taking power in Taipei and boost the chances of the ruling DPP's Ching-te, whom Beijing has branded a troublemaker.
China has begun military drills around Taiwan.
We haven't seen this level of incursion.
We will not abandon our commitment to Taiwan.
Japan says China likely fired missiles over parts of Taiwan.
12 warships, 54 of those warplanes crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait.
China looms large in the election, with the People's Liberation Army flexing its muscles.
实现祖国完全统一是民心所向。
And the Communist Party stepping up the rhetoric.
When Taiwanese voters go to the booth on election day, China is the key issue. That doesn't mean they don't care about economics, social issues. It's just that when people are deciding who should be the next president of Taiwan, it's China and Taiwan's future that is the main issue that people use to decide.
Not only do you have it as a potential turning point on Taiwan's domestic and foreign policy issues, but elections in Taiwan tend to be inflection points for the cross-strait relationship. They have seen over the history of Taiwan's presidential election sort of a change in the relationship and also heightened periods of tension leading up to and following it.
Despite opposing approaches to cross-strait ties, none of the candidates are advocating formal independence or unification with China, with polls showing most people prefer the status quo.
They enjoy Taiwan's ability to exist as a free and fair democracy, and they don't want to change that. And the concern is that any policy that is too strong in either direction has the potential to shift the status quo. And to that degree, presidents and presidential candidates are constrained knowing that the public doesn't want any sort of radical change.
The U.S. has also called for maintaining the current balance, with Taiwan vital to its own interests.
Taiwan is a critical part of major supply chains, namely cutting-edge semiconductors, which are now feeding into almost every piece of technology that we use on a daily basis. It's one of the most liberal democracies in the Asia-Pacific. I think it's been a partner to the United States when it comes to helping promote those kinds of values around the world.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
Despite President Biden's statements on defending Taiwan, Washington has officially stuck to a policy of strategic ambiguity, avoiding a clear commitment to intervene in any conflict with China. That stance has helped keep the peace for decades, but a looming change of leadership on the island could inject uncertainty.
Now, what makes this election particularly different is that this is the end of Tsai Ing-wen's era. So we've had 8 years of her administration, and regardless of who wins next, we're going to be going into uncharted territory with a new president.
Peace and stability in the Strait isn't just an issue that's of importance to China or to Taiwan or the U.S. It is at the center of the region and has important implications for really all the partners in that neighborhood.
The world is watching as Taiwanese voters choose their new president, and their decision could determine the balance of power and prospects for peace and stability in this region in the years to come. From Bloomberg Television, I'm Yvonne Mann in Taipei. Thanks for watching.